This is the nature of things. Snow falls to Earth, and with it, a world of magic, where one can find the hallelujah crystal, duck feet, and stellar dendrites.
What's amazed me is just how unlike they really are.
But with these delicate little flakes come big questions. Why do snowflakes take the shapes they do? And how do they turn from something so beautiful into something so deadly?
It's constantly changing from thing that almost like that to something that ends up like that in a few hours.
After all, snow has been called just freshly fallen physics. And it's so important that scientists are now throwing themselves into the eye of the storm.
Certainly, I never wish these storms on anybody, but if they're happening, I always say I want to be where they're happening.
Snow. We Canadians think we know a thing or two about winter weather. The truth is, we actually don't know much about the nature of snow. But that is changing. Now scientists are showing us snow in ways we've never seen it before. Don Komorechka has an obsession with snow. You see, Don is a professional snowflake photographer, a very passionate one.
I wouldn't say that I love snow, but I love snowflakes. I love the geometry, I love the science, I love the physics into how these things get put together. I'm not a scientist or a physicist by any means, I'm a photographer, but I'm still fascinated by the tiny things in the world. When I look at a snowflake, I see almost a little universe happening, something growing from almost nothing.
Don takes multiple exposures of a single snowflake, then meticulously assembles the images to accentuate every detail.
I'm looking for snowflakes, specifically the most pristine, I'm going to say the most geometric snowflakes that you'll find. Not all of them have that symmetry. In fact, very few of them do. I can get a look to see how the light bends and plays with the crystal. And if it looks good, then I get the camera in front of it. I've been photographing snowflakes, hundreds if not thousands of them, and putting them all together, and they're all beautiful, and I have great examples of every one, but I don't have the perfect one yet.
To find the perfect snowflake, we must turn to science. And where else would one expect to find groundbreaking snowflake research but in sunny California, of course? In fact, Caltech physicist Ken Liebrecht knows snow so well that when Disney decided to animate the magical world of Frozen, they called him. So Disney's Frozen Kingdom was created with the help of snow science.
I was impressed that they really wanted to get it right. I mean, they wanted to make the crystals sort of anatomically correct in a sense, and they weren't just throwing stuff around. They really wanted to be realistic in that sense of the word, that it was the accurate structure of ice.
Turns out, the team at Disney aren't the only ones who don't know exactly what a snowflake is.
A lot of people think that snowflakes are just frozen raindrops, but that's not the way it works.
It starts with a water molecule's properties, perfect for bonding and growth. Next, inside a sub-zero cloud, water vapor condenses into droplets, then freezes. These tiny pieces of ice then grow larger by sucking water vapor out of hundreds of thousands of nearby droplets.
When a snowflake grows, it actually is taking water vapor out of the air. And it's when the crystal grows from the vapor that it gets this very complex shape that we see as a snowflake. So it's not frozen water, it's ice, but it's not frozen from liquid water, it's frozen from water vapor. It's just amazing. There's all these little works of art falling out of the sky, and you never really saw them before until you take a look.
To better understand these dynamics, Liebrecht wanted to observe the creation of individual snowflakes. But without a way of embedding himself in an actual cloud, he did the next best thing, made a pseudo-cloud in his lab.
This is a cold chamber, and it's actually 2 chambers in one. And over here we have the temperature is set in the center of the chamber to -5, and then the humidity is very high. And there we can grow these ice needles. And so we slide the manipulator arm over here, and then we put 2,000 volts on the wire, and that causes these thin ice needles to grow out of the wire.
The tiny ice needle will now provide the ideal base for a snowflake to grow upon. This second chamber, where the air is warmer and wetter, provides the perfect atmosphere for a designer snowflake to form.
Well, when a snowflake grows, what it starts out as a little tiny piece of ice, and originally it starts growing as a hexagon, so a little hexagonal plate. And as it gets bigger, the points of the hexagon, they stick out a little farther into the air, and that's where the water vapor is. And so as the crystal gets bigger, it will sprout branches. And so each corner will sprout a little branch that grows out, and then the branches will sprout side branches, and the whole thing turns into this very complex dendritic structure. It's looking good.
There it is, a designer snowflake. And yet some snowflake mysteries persist.
Well, some parts of it we understand and some parts we don't. One thing we understand really well is why they're six-sided, why they have this six-fold symmetry, and that's just the structure of the ice crystal. That's the way the molecules line up with that six-fold symmetry. And we understand pretty well why they branch with the humidity and the structure of that branching. It gets harder when we start looking at how the growth changes with temperature. And in particular, why we get plate-like crystals at some temperatures and long, thin ice needles and columns at other temperatures. That's been a puzzle for 75 years, and it's still a puzzle.
And for the man who makes his own snowflakes, the big question, why can't 2 snowflakes ever be exactly alike?
If you're making really large, ornate crystals, then the chances of seeing 2 that are exactly alike is almost 0, because they're just complicated, and it's like seeing 2 trees that are exactly the same. Every branch, every leaf, it just can't happen because there's too many possibilities for the different ways to make a tree, and the same is true of a snowflake. And at some level, you can calculate how many possible ways there are to make a large snowflake. And the total number is larger than the number of atoms in the universe.
While Ken Liebrecht studies pristine snowflakes in the lab, out in the real world, snow is much more complex and even dangerous. And when it comes to understanding snow's dark side, look no further than Montana State University professor Ed Adams.
I'm an engineering mechanist, so we approach snow as an engineering material. And it's a fascinating one for a lot of reasons. From an engineering perspective, snow is a warm material because it's so close to its melting temperature that it acts like most engineering type materials would at very high elevated temperatures.
If it's hard to picture snow as a warm material, hold on to your toque, because Professor Adams doesn't stop there.
And then if we talk about, is it white? Well, in the infrared or the thermal part of the snow, it's actually very close to being what we call a black body. I mean, it perfectly emits and absorbs thermal energy. In essence, snow is white and cold, but we look at it as both warm and black. So it's complicated. We start right there.
How does someone arrive at such a unique way of looking at snow? For Ed Adams, it all started with a ski trip.
I would clearly say that snow has changed my life. The first winter I moved to Utah, it happened to be a very, very large avalanche cycle, and the mountains just came down everywhere. They hit the lodge I was staying in, they hit another lodge down the road, they swept through the parking lot and took cars, brought them back into the ski area, and it was just such an incredible event to watch. I just got enamored with the whole concept.
Utterly awestruck early in his career, Ed Adams decided to get into avalanches. Literally, get right into the middle of them. All he needed was the perfect avalanche chute with a huge boulder parked halfway down its course.
There was this big old rock kind of in the middle of it. It's not a huge avalanche path, but you wouldn't want to be in it. We're taking out trees and stuff, so it was substantial. But we just said, well, we could bolt in behind this rock, so we kind of did.
Ed and his colleagues built a plywood shack with a plexiglass window and bolted it into the downhill side of the boulder. After the next big snowfall, they trekked up the mountain and took their positions.
We'd set this explosive off and we'd get inside, and then we wouldn't know for a few seconds. And this big rumble, and it'd go dark, and everything would come rumbling by, and sometimes it would just wash on by, and the light would come back again. And so, but we did it quite a few times. Did it for a number of years, and got some interesting stuff out of it, you know.
I was pinned. We got data.
He doesn't play in avalanches anymore, but that gonzo field work got Ed Adams thinking about avalanches in different ways. The conventional understanding is that major avalanches are most often caused by something called hoarfrost, essentially frozen dew. When surface hoarfrost gets buried by fresh snowfall, it has a slippery quality that can lead to that new snow sliding off and causing an avalanche. Now, having actually been inside an avalanche, Ed has come up with another reason that weak layers may be forming in the snowpack. To test his theories, Ed built a unique laboratory, his sub-zero facility. Dave Walters, one of Ed's grad students, is creating a mountaintop snowpack right here in this deep freezer of a lab. A place where he can mimic the conditions on a mountainside, temperature, humidity, and even the sunlight in a controlled setting.
So the next step for me is we're just going to turn the sun on in this room and make it a nice sunny day on the snow.
Professor Adams needs to create just the right mix of artificial conditions so he can stress test snow layers for weaknesses, much as an engineer would test a suspension bridge.
Where do you get the lamp set at?
We're shooting for about 750 watts per meter squared.
What we're doing now is we're trying to simulate what we call radiation recrystallization of a surface snow. And the lamp here is simulating the solar impact. So the shortwave radiation penetrates into the snow, whereas the longwave radiation is getting sucked out to this cold sky, stimulated by the ceiling.
Ed believes that on bright, clear days, this recrystallization occurs as the sun's radiation reshapes individual snowflakes, reducing both the number of bonds and their strength.
And this recrystallization then leads to a weakening of the snowpack. Very thin layer that is like a centimeter or less thick. But when it gets subsequently buried, it becomes real problematic as far as an avalanche goes.
Once this sun-weakened layer is buried by more snow, there is a greater risk of avalanche. This weak layer will actually let go, and an avalanche is triggered. To recreate this weak layer in the lab, the sun lamp needs to blast the mini snowpack for 12 hours. This gives Ed and his research partner, Dan Miller, time to get to their other lab, the one that's a backcountry skier's paradise deep in avalanche territory.
So we're gonna head over here between those trees and those willows in there.
Yeah, it looks like a good spot.
The frequency of major avalanches swings back and forth, depending on the variability of weather in any particular winter season. However, over the last several decades, the average number of fatalities in North America has risen steadily. The simple reason is that there are more and more people taking to the backcountry. And as a result, when a weak layer fails and the snow comes thundering down the mountainside, there are more people caught in its deadly path. It's this ever-present danger that drives Ed to keep studying avalanches.
Everyone thinks snow research is exciting. It's a lot of digging.
I think there's a snowmobile at the bottom, that's my guess.
It looks like Ed and Dan are building a snow fort, but digging a snow pit helps them investigate the structure of the snow.
Okay, we're at the ground right here. So I think we'll square it up.
To understand the risk of avalanche, Ed must identify and carefully inspect the layers in the snow pack.
It's constantly changing from thing that's like almost like that to something that ends up like that in a few hours, and it's just a little thin layer. So that's the kind of thing we want to be able to find in here, because those little thin layers are what the problems are.
His fieldwork reaffirms why Ed needs his sub-zero lab. Snow is a veritable shapeshifter in the wild, and that makes it very difficult to study.
It's very sensitive to the temperature gradient, also the density of the snow. So all of these processes, and they're constantly changing. It's just constant.
The snow pits have been dug, the samples taken. Now it's time to return to the lab.
Not a bad day. We've got a moon to ski out of here. Hopefully, if we have to get out of here in the dark, we can at least see our way out. So.
Not a bad day of work.
All right, always. All right, I'm after you.
Back at the lab, the sun lamp is finished blasting the top layer of snow. The next step is to add a fresh coat onto the sun lamp damaged layer. A metal frame is then placed in the fresh snow. Next, a small amount of force is applied sideways to the box, building up until one of the snow layers below it slips or fails.
Well, we're about to fail on this weak layer that we've created with this long and short wave radiation energy imbalance, if you like, and that would simulate what we'd see in a large-scale avalanche. You might think about this as being a weak spot in the middle of the snow, and once this piece fails, it would propagate to a much larger slope scale thing.
Ever wonder what a controlled avalanche in a sub-zero lab might look like? Well, this is it.
Oh, there it goes.
There it goes.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and...
Nice. Very nice.
The snow scientists probably won't admit it, but that didn't really look like much. However, their excitement is based on the knowledge that this weak layer failure in the lab is exactly the same as this weak layer failure out here.
We're trying to keep everybody safe, whether it's for a highway or whether it's for a ski area or a backcountry skier. We're trying to understand processes better. How do avalanches happen? Why do they happen? And what are the mechanisms that drive them?
That'd be sweet to see that with the high speed, too.
Right. Good job.
It looks like Ed is onto something. Sunny days can affect the integrity of that black, warm engineering material. You know, snow. There's an expression in cold weather countries like Canada. There's no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing. Winter can bring much of the continent to a full stop in a matter of hours. Good clothing or not, it's never a good day when the Center for Severe Weather Research team shows up in your town. But that's exactly what's happening today in Oswego, New York. Storm-chasing scientists are here to capture data on a powerful snowstorm blasting its way across Lake Ontario.
For the research that we're doing for the project, this is a fantastic day for us.
And for atmospheric researchers like Dr. Karen Kosiba, there's no place she would rather be.
Woo! It's windy. Getting face burnt. Oh. It's very exciting to be in the path of the storm. It's also really exciting to collect the data and be out there and see what you're going to analyze later. I think it leads to a greater understanding as a scientist when you're doing the science, when you actually experience the weather and experience what goes into collecting the data.
Dr. Kosiba is a veteran storm chaser, mostly tornadoes and hurricanes, but she has come to Oswego, New York to study snowstorms with this Doppler radar on wheels.
The reason that this mobile radar is special is because we could drive it to where the weather is happening. So there's radars all across the country looking at weather that's happening, but they're usually very far away, and they're not seeing the fine-scale structure. The difference between this radar and those other radars is looking at something really close. So it's like having your hand here and looking at it, and having your hand really far away and looking at it.
Dr. Kosiba is using these radar trucks to look out into Lake Ontario to study lake-effect snowstorms that occur when cold winds blast across long stretches of warmer water. Although warm is not exactly a word that springs to mind here today.
The lake-effect snowstorms are unusual, and they only happen in localized areas. So this is a perfect location, obviously, because we're getting a lot of lake-effect snow. So the more that we understand not only what's happening here, but what's happening around the lake, will improve our understanding and also improve our ability to forecast these type of events.
Amazingly, this powerful lake effect storm is not actually that large, but it is focused like a laser on this part of Lake Ontario's southern shoreline.
You get a lot of snow, and I know it looks like this right here, but amazingly, if you go probably a mile south, there'll be none of this. It'll be a nice day out because these bands are very localized along the shore. Every once in a while they persist inland, but even when they persist inland, it's in a very narrow corridor. So it's really intriguing that they just provide kind of this localized snowfall amounts. So for people that live in places like this, they should be excited that they get their localized snow amounts that no other place in the country really sees.
The Doppler on wheels can peer through the swirling, whipping pellets into the eye of the snowstorm to study its complex inner workings.
What the radar is doing is it's literally just shining a flashlight into the storm and reflecting back what's in there. So the different types of snow particles that are in there, we're just getting information about where they are, how big they are, and how fast they're moving.
And what the radar can capture is even wilder than what we see here today.
You see that there's actually rotations. Sometimes there might even be water spouts over the lake that are happening with these lake effect snowstorms. So there's just a lot of cool things going on that you can't see just at the surface.
Dr. Kosiba has certainly done a good job of plunking her team down in this storm's narrow path. Now it's time to take a first glimpse inside this raging winter storm.
This here is what we get really excited about. This is our band of snow here. So here's the radar truck, and this is over Lake Ontario. And we're really interested in this purple fuzzy thing there. And then if you look down here, those are the winds associated with this band.
This is the first time multiple tornado-chasing trucks have been deployed to study lake effect snow. Believe it or not, this is the easy part. It will take months to plow through all the data. For now, the only thing for Karen to do is hope the bad weather holds.
Well, certainly I don't wish bad weather on anybody or any location, but if bad weather is happening, I feel that we should be there documenting what's happening so we can better understand that and we have a better understanding of future events. So I think ultimately what this project first will get is a greater understanding. We could apply that to forecasting and better forecasting and better modeling of these types of storms.
It's snowing hard here in Alta, Utah, yet no one is complaining. Well, almost no one. Canadian atmospheric scientist Tim Garrett has got a problem. For him, there's actually too much snow. So much has fallen in the last 24 hours that Garrett must adjust his research equipment. And to do this, Garrett needs Howie Howlett, Alta's master of the mountain.
I'm hoping we can turn around the camera a little so it's right on this side right here.
I think we need to raise it up with the forecast too.
Okay, you want me to rotate now?
Yeah, let's lift up a bit.
Okay.
You know, a few days ago when we had the six-sided flakes, they had free water on them. That was pretty neat.
Oh, you're talking about the lightly rhymed?
Yeah,
Perfect.
yeah.
Oh, I love those.
That was
they're
awesome,
so great.
man.
You know, it doesn't
Okay.
happen very often, but they almost look like little teddy bears or something.
Yeah, yeah.
The contraption Tim Garrett has been rigging up is an automated 3D camera, and it's helping him expose a dirty little snow secret. There's a big problem with our winter weather models. They aren't very good.
So we've probably all experienced times when there have been weather forecasts that have been completely wrong. Perhaps they predicted too much snow when there was very little at all, or it turned out that there was a huge snow dump and it wasn't forecast at all. And this has actually been a major Achilles heel in weather forecasting, is knowing what kinds of snowflakes form in the sky and how fast they fall.
Tackling this problem was not so simple. It turns out capturing a single falling snowflake is surprisingly tricky.
It's very difficult to measure the shape of a snowflake if it hits a surface. Once it hits something, it might even explode or shatter or crumple.
The wondrous thing about snowflakes, their delicate beauty, makes them fragile and very difficult to work with. Garrett's solution was to make absolutely sure the falling snowflakes touch nothing else.
Here we can measure the shape of a snowflake by taking a picture of it in the air without even touching it.
To do this, Garrett's team spent 3 years developing the high-speed 3D camera, but it was worth the wait.
Oh, the images are extraordinary. I had no idea just how wonderful the snowflake shapes would be before we started this project. We're seeing an incredible variety of snowflake shapes, ranging from tiny little pellets to incredible rafts of what we call aggregates, where snowflakes collect together by the hundreds or even the thousands, and a whole range of different shapes that lie in between those two extremes. I can see 2 entirely different snowflake types separated by a distance of just that much.
Light and fluffy or wet and heavy, the actual type of snow makes a big difference to our weather. And it turns out the information most weather models use is woefully out of date. We're talking 40 years out of date.
So back in the early 1970s, there was some really impressive work that was done by John Locatelli and Peter Hobbs at the University of Washington, using some really innovative tools to measure how fast snowflakes fell, and then to capture them on a slide and photograph them under a microscope.
That kind of painstaking work can be hazardous to a scientist's health.
I knew John Locatelli when I was a graduate student, and I remember him telling me that it was the looking through the microscope at snowflake after snowflake that he felt ruined his eyesight.
All that was to observe over 300 snowflake images. Tim Garrett is aiming for 1 million this winter. That will give him a lot of data to work with. Every day, without fail, Tim Garrett's 3D camera captures more falling snow that gives him something new to observe.
There's this incredible snowflake that fell a few minutes ago. Just this incredible mixture of aggregation and rhyming. We see some simple snowflakes that seem to have stuck together, and then those snowflakes must have collected tens of thousands of water droplets to create this really crazy shape. And to be able to see it in 3D is incredible.
Of course, it's not just about the pretty snowflake pictures. Tim Garrett is hopeful his snowflake camera will improve our wintry lives.
Where I see this going in the future is development of cameras that perhaps can be deployed at roadsides to help with traffic safety. So if we can build a simpler, cheaper version of this camera, then maybe this is something that can become fairly commonplace, so that wherever you are driving, you can see the types of snowflakes that are falling from the sky and plan road safety accordingly.
Whoa! This is like Napoleon's retreat from Russia.
Several newsrooms worth of reporters have trudged through the snow today to listen to this man.
I'm Frank Gerke, G-E-H.
A man with a most unusual job.
And I'm chief of the California Cooperative Snow Surveys program.
Who knew California had a chief snow surveyor? Well, turns out Frank's snow surveys are so important to understanding the state's water supply that they're required by law.
Okay.
And also why these reporters hang on his every word.
And what do you think the depth is going to be here? It's up 31. Probably a little blowing snow.
Frank is almost done.
And then take 8.1 and divide it by...
But first, a little arithmetic.
Phillips divided by 28.1.
He may be the state's chief snow surveyor, but a more apt description would be the snow oracle of California.
Alrighty.
Because what Frank is about to say will have an enormous impact on this land of nearly 40 million and its $2 trillion economy.
We had a depth of snow of 33.7 inches and a water content of 8.1 inches, representing 29% of its long-term average.
Translation, this is a disaster in the making. Only 29% of its usual snow means it's definitely going to be another bad water year for California. How bad is it? This was the state's snowpack in 2013, and this is it 1 year later. It's a grim picture, as Frank well knows.
It's not good news. A lot of the reservoirs are not going to fill, and it's a kind of a vicious cycle. We expect there to be quite a bit of acreage that's left fallow. It's just not economically feasible to farm it.
All this because of snow.
Without a good snowpack, everything comes to a gradual screeching halt.
So with all that hanging in the balance for California, is sticking a metal tube into the snow really the best they can do? Well, it turns out there's more than meets the eye to Frank. His old school snow surveys are effective, but they have their limits. To try to keep ahead of California's drought emergency, Frank needs some help, and he's getting a boost from a surprising source: NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab. NASA is lending Frank a piece of aluminum, a tad fancier than his metal tube, a de Havilland Twin Otter.
Hey, Frank.
It's a revolutionary way to look at what Frank calls the water crop.
How many lines are we doing this season?
Right now we have 28 to cover the entire basin. Yeah, you can actually zoom in and see all of the detail around the dam.
Yeah, having this equipment is going to be a real improvement over what we had before.
The plane is called the Airborne Snow Observatory. From it, Frank and his collaborators use a LiDAR, a measurement tool, to investigate the health of the snowpack.
The Airborne Snow Observatory with the LiDAR gives us the snow depth, and the ground-based measurements provide the snow density, and from depth times density gives you water content. So it's combining technology that was developed in 1909 with technology that's way beyond what we could even imagine 10, 20 years ago.
Already, the Airborne Snow Observatory is starting to flood Frank with fresh data to make his crucial predictions.
One of the problems that we have is our ground-based measurements basically are 11,000 feet and below. And in many of these Southern Sierra watersheds, there's fully a third of that watershed area above that point. So we're missing out on 1/3 of that watershed. And that's becoming more and more critical to to be able to monitor that so that we can make forecasts, especially as we get into the spring.
All this is vital in a California facing an uncertain snow future.
You know, this 3 years of drought is a wake-up call for all of us that we've got to start looking towards the future in terms of how we manage water, not only in California, but throughout the West.
And the stakes are enormous.
The perception of California is, you know, Disneyland and bright sunny beaches, but all of those depend upon the accumulated snowpack, both in the Sierra Nevada as well as the Colorado basins that provide the freshwater runoff that drives the economy of the entire state.
It's hard not to be awestruck by the majestic beauty of the Canadian Rockies. But where most of us see snow-capped mountains, University of Saskatchewan hydrologist John Pomeroy sees something else.
The mountains behind me are full of snow, and you can consider these as the water towers of Western Canada. They're holding meters of snow which will melt in the summertime and provide stream flow down in the semi-arid western prairies.
That's how it's supposed to work. But that's not what happened in the spring of 2013. The Alberta flood was the most expensive natural disaster in Canadian history, with damages well over $6 billion and 100,000 people driven from their homes. So what caused this rare type of flood? And why was this one so destructive? Well, the answer is rain, but not just any rain. A so-called rain-on-snow event, which until recently was atypical here.
A rain-on-snow event is when we have a high mountain snowpack and it starts to rain, and not only just a regular rain, but a warm rain. So the rain can cause flooding itself, but the rain on the snow accelerates the snowmelt. You add the two together, and that can often cause the flood of record in many regions. The Alberta floods of 2013, the Manitoba floods of 2011 were both driven by rain on snowmelt events, and they caused tremendous damage. In fact, these are some of the most damaging floods in Canadian history, and so it's clearly something we have to understand much better.
And for Professor Pomeroy, that starts high up in the mountains, beginning with the dynamics of the snowpack.
Okay, let's see what's going on in here. Well, it's looking not too bad. Up to 2 degrees. Pretty good for a winter's day. Solar radiation coming through. Looks quite strong today, over 800 watts per square meter.
These mini weather stations allow Dr. Pomeroy to chart mountaintop weather, and most importantly, to see exactly how much snow is coming down up there.
This is a precipitation gauge. It's measuring rainfall and snowfall. And what we have around it here is an alter shield. This was developed many, many years ago to slow down the wind as it gets over the gauge top. Otherwise, the snowflakes, which fall very slowly, will blow over the top and not into the gauge. And so under strong winds, we undermeasure snowfall very badly without a shield like this.
Dr. Pomeroy doesn't stop there. He wants a full snow inventory of these jagged peaks. To that end, 2 of his grad students routinely trudge this laser system up into the mountains. Once it's set up and turned on, its invisible laser beam can scan this entire valley with remarkable accuracy.
Now we can send a laser beam to get a very, very accurate snow depth at millions of points eventually over this mountainside, including places where we dare not walk, including avalanche paths, under deep cornices, other areas that are very dangerous to go. So it's changed everything because now we can figure out what the snow depth really is in the high mountains.
However, depth alone will not reveal the total volume of water temporarily locked away in the snowpack. That's where this rig comes in. Although it looks like there could be a baby in this ski carriage, it sure doesn't sound like one.
Well, what's in there is what we call the system for acoustic sounding of snow. which is a fancy way of calling it a snow sonar. We send a sound wave out of this, sounds like static, runs into the snowpack. As it comes out, it's been distorted by how much ice and snow there is in there, how much water is in there, and the temperature of that snowpack, and even the layering of the snowpack and the strength. So it tells us all kinds of things about the snowpack that we'd normally have to dig a snow pit to measure, and that snow pit can take an hour or two, and this just takes a few seconds.
Dr. Pomeroy is digging in deep in his effort to bring snow science into the 21st century.
We're hitting this mountain with everything we can get our hands on. We have lasers up in here, we have infrared cameras, we have sonic anemometers to measure turbulence, and soon we'll have UAVs flying over this as well. 10 years ago, this would have required a camp of 25 people working from 8 in the morning to 11 o'clock at night, measuring snow depth. Very, very labor intensive, and in the end, we always felt we never quite sampled enough to understand what was going on here, how the snow was redistributed, and how it was melting on south-facing slopes versus north-facing slopes. Now we can do that.
It's no wonder that a hydrologist like Dr. Pomeroy sees so much more than just snow when he looks up at these picture-perfect mountain peaks.
There's a tremendous dichotomy to snow. We go up in the alpine areas, it's beautiful. We want to ski on it. We look at melting snowpack, alpine meadows, it's gorgeous. When you come down here, we see the destructive power of snow and of water. This channel was eroded just over a day and a half and cut down. These trees fell down, the boulders moved. That's incredible destructive power, and that's the other side of snow.
Winter is winding down, and it's the time of thaw and melt. And for Don Komarechka, a wonderful day to be outside, camera in hand.
You know, the snow is still around. It's still a great time to be out shooting.
The photographer has had an extremely busy winter.
This winter for snowflakes has been absolutely fantastic. For me, it's been the best, I think, on record. You know, we had a bumper crop.
Quadrillions of flakes fell this winter, and Don photographed hundreds of these. But did he get that perfect one?
I haven't gotten the perfect shot of a snowflake yet. That's still to come, I'm sure. I got close a couple of times this year, but I just don't know if I've gotten quite what I would consider to be a perfect snowflake.
While chasing the perfect flake is Don's personal obsession, his goal is to share his snowflake images with the rest of us.
Snowflakes are tiny things, and if something is so small, you can't really see the details with your own eyes, even if you want to. And so when I can photograph a snowflake and I can blow it up to the size of a dinner plate, then people can see that beauty, they could admire it and be fascinated by the tiny details, and then look back and see all the beauty that's right under their nose. And if you're not taking a moment to admire that, then you're missing out on one of the best gifts that nature has to offer.